Step 2 is where everybody thinks they're finally getting it. But this is the exact point where people ruin their progress without even realizing it. Because what feels like progress here usually isn't. It's just a more convincing form of distraction. So you keep going, reinforcing bad habits and thinking that you're advancing, when in reality you're drifting farther away from what this step is actually asking you to do. And if you've been working through step 2 and something feels slightly off, like you're not getting the clarity or the control you expected, you're not crazy. That's the exact moment where people hit this wall. In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 exact mistakes that cause this, and once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. More importantly, you'll finally understand what step 2 is supposed to look like when it's done right. Before we even get into the mistakes, you need to understand what step 2 actually is, because this is where most people go wrong right from the start. They don't see the structure. They think that it's just more practice, more effort, more intensity. But step 2 isn't just one thing. It's 3 parallel disciplines trained at the same time, and each one has a very specific purpose. You have the mental side, the astral side, and the physical side. So let's break this down. First, mental training. This is your concentration work, but not just focus in the general sense. This is single sense concentration, meaning you take one sense, just one, and you hold it steadily. Not jumping between images, not adding layers, just building raw control over your attention through one channel at a time. That's the foundation. Second, astral training. This is your character work, but this is where people make the first mistake. It's not vague self-improvement, it's structured transformation. You're observing your behavior throughout the day, identifying specific traits, and then deliberately working on them one at a time. This is where you actually start changing who you are. Not in theory, but in real, repeatable patterns. And then third, physical training. This is pore breathing. And again, not in the way most people interpret it. This isn't about intense breathing techniques or trying to feel energy rushing throughout your body. It's about developing a different kind of bodily awareness, learning to experience the body as something you can consciously engage with, not just something you passively exist in. So you have these 3 lanes. Mental control, character transformation, bodily awareness. And they're all happening together. Not randomly and not loosely, but in a structured way. And this is the part most people miss. Step 2 is still foundational. It may feel more complex than step 1, but the goal here is not to impress yourself. It's to stabilize yourself. You build precision, you build control, and you build consistency across all 3 layers. And the moment you lose that structure and you start blending things together, this is when the mistakes start creeping in. The first mistake is trying to make your imagination cinematic way too early. And this is extremely common, especially for those actually putting in the work. Because what happens is you start with the basic instruction, which is focus on one object, and pretty quickly that starts to feel too simple. So naturally your mind wants to upgrade it. You go from holding a single image to building a full scene. Now there's movement, there's sound, there's emotion, maybe even interaction. It starts to feel immersive, almost like you're inside of it. And because it feels more intense, more vivid, you assume you're progressing, like you've moved beyond the beginner level. But here's the problem. Step 2 is not about complexity. It's about control, and those 2 are not the same thing. In fact, most of the time, they are complete opposites. Because what you're supposed to be doing here is isolating a single sense, just one, whether it's visual, auditory, or tactile. You're holding it steadily, without drifting, and without collapse. But the moment you start stacking senses together, you're no longer focusing on concentration. You're stimulating the mind. And that feels very similar, but it produces different results. One builds control, and the other builds reliance on stimulation. And this is where people unknowingly sabotage themselves. Because instead of strengthening one channel of attention, they're splitting it up across multiple inputs. From a cognitive standpoint, your attention is a limited resource. It doesn't expand just because you add more detail. It divides. So now, instead of having strong, stable focus on one thing, you have weaker, scattered focus across several things. It feels richer, but it's actually less precise. And this is exactly why this kind of work is placed later in the system. That multi-sensory, fully immersive imagination, that belongs in step 3. That's where you start combining senses after you've built control over each one individually. But if you try to jump there early, you're building complexity on top of instability, and it doesn't hold. So what does this actually mean for you? It means you need to simplify radically. If you're working with visual concentration, pick one object, a white sphere, a candle flame, a simple shape, and hold it. No movement, no added layers, no scene, just stability. If it drifts, bring it back. If it fades, rebuild it over and over. That's the work. Because if you can't hold a single image steadily, adding more layers isn't progression, it's escape. The second mistake is treating the astral work like vague self-help. And this is where a lot of people start doing the work, but nothing changes. Because the approach is too general. It becomes things like, I just need to be better. I need to improve myself. I need to be more disciplined, more calm, more focused. And it sounds good, it feels productive, but it's completely unfocused. And because it's unfocused, it doesn't produce real transformation. That's not what step 2 is asking you to do. It's not about becoming a better person in some broad, undefined way. It's about targeted character engineering, meaning you don't try to fix everything at once. You pick one specific trait and you work on that, deliberately, repeatedly, until it changes. And that's the difference. You're not spreading your effort across your entire personality. You're concentrating it, just like you do with your attention. So what does that actually look like? Let's say your issue is impatience. Most people will approach that by saying, I need to be more calm, but that's too vague. There's nothing to apply. Instead, you observe. Throughout your day, you start noticing exactly where impatience shows up. Maybe it's when you're waiting in line. Maybe it's when somebody is talking too slowly. Maybe it's when things don't go your way immediately. You don't judge it, you just track it. You make it visible. Then you isolate it. You decide, this is the trait I'm working on right now. Not 10 things, not your entire personality, just this. And then you introduce auto-suggestion. Something simple, direct, and specific. Like, I respond calmly and deliberately in all situations. Now, here's where most people still fall off. They say it once or twice, maybe a few times in the morning, and then forget about it completely. That's not the process. The real work is repetition, paired with awareness. You repeat that auto-suggestion daily while watching yourself in real day-to-day situations. So when impatience starts to rise, you catch it and you reinforce the new pattern again and again and again. And that's how change actually happens. Because what you're doing here is rewiring behavioral patterns through repetition and awareness. Not motivation, not intention, repetition. This is basic neuroplasticity. The brain changes based on what you repeatedly do and reinforce, not what you want to be true. So if your approach is vague, your results will be vague. But if your approach is precise, your transformation becomes measurable. One trait worked daily until it's different. That's how step 2 is meant to be done. The third mistake is completely misunderstanding pore breathing. And this one is heavily influenced by modern trends. Because immediately, whenever somebody hears anything related to breathing, they turn it into some sort of breathing technique. Something that's intense. Think Wim Hof here. You're trying to feel something, whether it's heat, tingling, or pressure moving throughout your body. And again, you can do that. And it can feel like something is happening. So you assume that you're doing it right. But step 2 is not about building energy. That comes later. This is where a lot of people unknowingly skip ahead in the system. And in doing that, they miss the actual purpose of the practice. Because pore breathing in step 2 is not about accumulation. It's about awareness and integration. You're not trying to generate something. You're trying to perceive something. And that's a completely different orientation. Right now, the goal is to change how you experience your own body, to move from passive awareness to an active one. Most people only feel their body in a very limited way. They feel their breath in their lungs, maybe their chest, maybe their stomach. But beyond that, it's mostly unconscious. Pore breathing is training you to expand that awareness, to start experiencing the body as something that is fully alive, fully responsive, and consciously accessible. A simple way to understand it is this. Instead of breathing through your lungs, you start experiencing breathing as happening through the entire surface of your body, as if every pore is participating in the process, not in a forced way, not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle, controlled, and intentional way. And this is where most people go wrong. They try to amplify the sensation. They push it. They force it. They chase something intense so they can feel like it's actually working. But that misses the point entirely. Because the moment you start chasing sensation, you've left the practice. Now you're back in stimulation, not awareness. And it matters more than it seems. Because this physical lane is meant to support the other two. It grounds your attention. It connects your awareness to your body. It stabilizes your overall practice. But if you turn it into some kind of intensity-based exercise, you lose that stability. So the correction here is simple. Stop trying to make it powerful. Make it precise. Keep it subtle. Keep it controlled. And focus on perception, not sensation. Because in step 2, you're not trying to build something yet. You're learning how to feel correctly. And that foundation is what everything else is built upon. So after everything we've just broke down, the mistakes, the confusion, the way people drift off track, what does the right approach actually look like in practice? It's simple, but it's not easy. And most people struggle with it because it's simple, because it removes the stimulation, all the feeling of wanting to do more, and it replaces it with precision. The real formula for step 2 is this: one sense, one trait, one bodily practice. That's it. That's the system. Nothing extra, nothing added, nothing layered on top. Just 3 things trained in parallel with full attention. One sense, meaning your concentration work stays isolated. If you're working visually, you stay visual. You don't jump to sound, you don't add movement, you don't build senses. You take one object and you stabilize it, day after day, until it stops collapsing, until it becomes steady. Then, and only then, do you move forward. Same with astral work. One trait. Not 5, not your entire personality. 1. You identify it, you observe it throughout your day, and you work it deliberately, through awareness, through autosuggestion, through repetition. And you don't switch just because you get bored. You stay with it until something actually changes, until your reactions shift, until your behavior becomes different without forcing it. And that's how you know it's working. And then the physical side. One practice. Pore breathing. Done calmly, precisely, and without chasing sensation. You're not trying to make it stronger every day. You're trying to make it clearer, more controlled, more natural, more integrated into your awareness. And this is the part most people resist, because there's no constant novelty here. There's no feeling of rapid progression. There's just consistency. You don't rotate constantly. You don't chase intensity. You stabilize. You stay with one sense until it's steady. You stay with one trait until it actually changes. And you stay with one practice until it becomes natural. That is what step 2 is actually asking you to do. It's trying to build something that doesn't break. Because once this foundation is solid, then you can start handling more complexity. Then you can start moving into the deeper work. But if you rush past this, then everything that comes next will be unstable. So the real discipline here is restraint. Doing less, but doing it correctly. And repeating it until it becomes part of you. Step 2 is the bridge. It's the point where basic discipline stops being surface level and starts becoming real inner transformation. Up until now, you're mostly learning control of your thoughts, your attention, and your awareness. But here, you're starting to apply that control to your mind, to your behavior, and to your body. And that's why this step matters so much. Because if this part is weak, everything that comes after it will be unstable. You might move forward. You might start doing more advanced practices. You might even feel like you're progressing. But underneath it, there's no structure holding it together. And eventually, it collapses. Not because the system doesn't work, but because the foundation was never fully built. So don't rush this. Don't try to skip ahead, and don't confuse intensity with progress, because the ones that move forward in this system take the time to actually get this part right. And before you go, I'm curious, what part of step 2 are you struggling with the most right now? Is it concentration, where your mind won't stay steady? Is it the character work, actually applying it throughout your day? Or is it pore breathing, actually understanding what you're trying to feel? Let me know down in the comments. I read them all, and it gives me an idea on what I should break down next.